All right.
Right.
So this is Dr. Hillary Powell from the psych department.
Mhm.
So do you want to tell everyone what your specialty area is and kind of what you do?
Definitely. So, hi everybody. As Kristen shared, I'm Dr. Hillary Powell. I'm a clinical psychologist by training. So that means my focus is on thinking about providing treatment for folks with different mental health concerns. And so, in addition to teaching at UNE and doing research, I also practice in the community. So, I work with folks primarily with anxiety, depression, ADHD, sleep issues, um, some general life stressors. That's a lot of my clinical work. And then in terms of kind of my area of focus or specialty, especially when we talk about research, my focus there, I do a lot of work with looking at mental health disparities amongst individuals who are gender and sexual minorities, so folks who are LGBTQ.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So uh, one of the things we're focusing on for this event is for students who are graduating with a bachelor's. So what do you consider some of the options for someone who's graduating with a bachelor's in something like psychology or like a related area?
Ooh, what a great question. Yeah, it's funny because I've been thinking a lot about recently about my bachelor's degree, and I came to the end of it, and I had I was majoring in psychology and double majoring in women and gender studies, and I came to the end of it, and I had no idea what jobs looked like. I think I was in April of my final year and didn't know what I was going to do, and panic was starting to set in. So I'm glad people are thinking about their next steps, and I'm also wanting to normalize if that's something you're putting off, that can be that that's also within the norm. Um, yeah, but there's a lot that you can do. There's a lot that you can do. So um, let's see. So I'll start with maybe what my path was, and can also talk a little bit more about the mental health end of things. So my path after I graduated, I actually really wanted to become an event manager because I had been doing a lot of club organizing on campus. I didn't get a job there, but fortuitously, I ended up working as a research assistant at UMass Medical School down in Worcester, Massachusetts. And it was that position that really got me a lot more competitive for my next steps when I went back to graduate school. And so looking at research assistant jobs is a great thing to be looking for, especially if you want to continue your education later. Um, and the nice thing is, of course, I know a lot of students are already involved in research work here at the university, and so that translates really well into that next kind of job. So that's one route that you can go. Another route that you can go, at least in kind of my neck of the woods, is looking at the mental health positions that are available. And goodness knows we need it. There's such a demand for people in the mental health field right now. And so work in that area can look like working as a psych tech. So you could be working, for example, an inpatient psychiatric unit, helping with some of those kind of daily goings on. You can work in a residential treatment facility. So helping lead some support groups, helping individuals kind of plan through their day, who might have various kind of mental health concerns, um, or um, or developmental disabilities, um, or um, or on the other end of the spectrum, thinking about, for example, adults with dementia. So these are some areas where we really need people who are trained in mental health, who are trained in kind of neurocognitive and neurodevelopmental concerns, to be providing some of that day-to-day support. You can also work at a variety of nonprofits in the area, so Big Brothers Big Sisters, a YMCA. They're often looking for people to help run different kinds of groups and programming, and having a background in psychology is really going to help you with those people skills to manage those interactions with individuals. Some people go into work being something like a special ed tech is another option. Working in the schools, working with kids with different IEP plans or working with kids with different disabilities, that's really needed. Um, Yeah, so those are the issues that really kind of fall into my wheelhouse, and that's certainly not everything. Oh, I'll also say a nice one for folks who are a little bit more neuroscience-y. I've had friends work as a neuropsych tester, so they help perform some of those neuropsychological tests. They don't do all of the integration of data and formulating the report, but they administer the test themselves. So that can be a really nice thing to be looking into too.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you gave like a ton of different examples for different areas. That's super helpful.
Yeah, and I hope it's not too much.
No, no, it's great.
Good, good.
So you also went on eventually to get a higher degree.
Mhm.
So if someone wanted to start looking into that type of thing, like how would they go about it, and what kinds of degrees are there for someone who's interested in that?
Totally. I can speak most closely to if you're interested in doing work in the mental health field, and I know that can be a bit overwhelming because there are lots of options. So I got my PhD in clinical psychology, and that took me all of 7 years, and then you still have a postdoc on top of that. I took an extra year than most people take. I was just kind of happy. I met my partner. We were just kind of taking a little bit longer. So if you end up in any PhD program, well, most PhD programs, there's going to be a big emphasis on research. And what that looks like in the mental health field, if you get a PhD in clinical psychology or counseling psychology, there's going to be an emphasis on you being a science practitioner, a scientist practitioner, meaning that you are adept at creating and understanding research, and you're also adept at clinical practice, and you can kind of combine the two to have a meaningful career. So these kinds of PhD level programs, you're doing a ton of research, you're doing coursework, you're doing clinical work, you might be teaching, and typically these programs take anywhere from 5 to 7 years. Um, they're a long time, and they're particularly good if you're interested in research or if you're interested in going into something like academia. Typically, these kinds of programs, you can get some kind of tuition remission and sometimes a little stipend, and that means that you're not ending up hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. I think the average debt, well, maybe I won't quote a number, but it can be as, I left graduate school with about $12,000 in debt, which is not terrible for 7 years of school. It kind of depends on where you end up, I will say that. There are PsyD programs, so this is a clinical doctoral degree, and what that means is you're not doing much, if any, research in the course of that program. It depends a lot on your program. The focus is really on practice. There is a lot of variability in the quality of PsyD programs, so it's important to consult. I think they get a lot of flack, but some of my best supervisors have had their PsyDs and have been wonderfully skilled. These programs don't tend to have the same kind of financial assistance that a PhD program would have, though. So people tend to end with much more debt. There are also different kinds of counseling master's level programs. These are a lot quicker, relatively speaking. They're like 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 if you're going part-time. As well as you can get your master's in social work with a focus in clinical practice. And these programs often set you up to be a counselor, to be a therapist in different mental health settings or in private practice. So if you're thinking that you might want to be a mental health clinician and you're not super interested in the research stuff, it's not a bad idea to get your master's. You'll be in the work faster, or at least you'll be in the field independently more quickly. You're not racking up the debt of 6 or 7 years of schooling. If you're interested in more of the research end of things, or you really have your heart set on that much longer term educational experience, that's when you can think about those doctoral level programs. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, it's good to know that there's a lot of options out there for people, and it's especially good to know the difference between like the master's level and the PhD level having, a lot more time you need to be able to dedicate, as well
Yeah.
as the difference between, research emphasis versus like the getting out into the workforce and counseling emphasis in the master's.
Yeah, yeah.
So you said that you went into a clinical PhD program. Why did you end up choosing that path versus another PhD or um, a master's or, one of the other options?
Yeah. Oh, what a good question. Um, I was someone who was not well directed. Clearly, I wasn't thinking about a job until April of my senior year as an undergrad, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do in particular. I had really loved my experience in research. I was really excited about it because I really cared about social justice work and advocacy, and my research was very social justice focused, all the research that I had been doing. And so with that, I kind of knew I wanted to do something a little bit more researchy in the long run. And then I think there was also something so appealing to think, oh, I could be Dr. Powell one day or Dr. Gleason. My name used to be Gleason. So it was kind of superficial. I kind of wanted to get my doctorate. So honestly, I thought I would end up getting my doctorate in a social psych program because I was really interested in implicit bias and how that impacts and how that correlates with discriminatory behavior, particularly for LGBTQ folks. So I thought I'd end up going social, and I actually applied to 4 social psychology programs. I applied to one industrial organizational psychology program because they were doing work on non-discrimination policies around LGBTQ folks, and that sounded interesting to me. But I applied to majority clinical programs, and the only reason I did that is because my undergraduate mentor told me. Her name's Dr. Abby Goldberg of Clark University. She's wonderful. She said, Hillary, you want to be a clinical psychologist? And I said, okay, thanks. And so I primarily applied to those programs. I did not want to do anything clinical. I'm very easily drained. And so I didn't think it would be good for me. But on the interview circuit, what I found was the people I connected with most were clinical psychologists in terms of the work that they were doing. I was really excited about like the direct implications for individuals and their mental health. And then I just completely felt like I fit with my graduate school mentor. His name is Dr. Brian Cochran, and he is maybe my favorite person in the world. And so it's really about that fit that told me what program I wanted to be in. And it took me probably 5 years of graduate school to determine that I really did actually like clinical work. At first, I was having a hard time, again, with that kind of boundary between practice and being able to leave because it's heavy stuff that you're talking about. So one of the biggest areas I grew in grad school was being able to enact kind of healthy boundaries in those professional relationships. And since then, I've really enjoyed clinical work.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. I know it's a bit indirect, but maybe it's helpful.
No, it is. So how many programs did you apply to? And like, do you think there's like a good number that people should apply for? Or I don't know. I think it's hard for people to know how many programs they should be applying to because it is different than when you're applying to bachelor's programs. So I don't know, it's different. So
Yeah, yeah. What a good question. And it depends a lot on the type of program you're applying to. So clinical psychology programs, there's high demand and there are few spots. And so that ends up being a really competitive program. When I was applying, it was the second hardest program to get into, and hardest in the sense of the most competitive. You're competing against the most people. I don't know if it's still that, but it's still up there. And so I had the advice at the time to apply to at least eight to probably 12 clinical programs. I applied to, I think, six clinical, yeah, I think four social, no, maybe seven clinical, four social, and one IO program, industrial organizational program. Um, I only got an interview at three of them, and I got an offer at two of them. Um, well, maybe that's not true. There was some like funding stuff that made me cut some programs off the list sooner than later. It's not uncommon for folks, especially right out of undergrad, to apply to these programs and to not get in, and so then to have to apply again the next year. That's not uncommon, and it's nothing to do with your application or the quality of your experiences. It's everything to do with um, just how tightly competitive these programs are because of the demand for them. So I would recommend people, if you're going for something like clinical psychology, apply to maybe 8 to 10. Um, Neuropsychology can even be a little bit more competitive, so maybe closer to the 10 range. If you're going for a PsyD program, certainly you don't have to apply to quite as many because they just have a lot of seats. They're wanting to get people out in the field doing this work. Um, so you can apply to fewer. I would say something like maybe 4 to 6 would be a good range, but definitely consult around that. If you're looking at a different PhD program, maybe again looking at something closer to around that six mark, maybe 6 to 8. But again, I would totally consult around that with maybe your other professors or what you can find online. And if you're looking at a master's level program, I've had people apply to one and get into that one, but typically I recommend try applying to something like 2 to 5, and that tends to give you a good shot.
Awesome. That's really helpful.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good.
So when you were applying and, trying to figure out your path,
Mhm.
what were some of the things that you wish you knew, and what do you think were some of the benefits of the path that you chose?
Ooh, yeah. I wish I knew. What did I wish I knew? Um, I think a lot of times we see graduate school as a means to an end. Like at the end, I'll have this career. And it's kind of ironic because I'm at the other end. I mean, I just graduated in 2020. I'm still completing my postdoc now. Um, and and it's and I what I found is that graduate school was not a means to an end. I had so much personal growth and experienced so much transformation and just so much joy in graduate school that it was an end in and of itself. I loved being a graduate student at times. I mean, at other times, being a student, right, you're pulling your hair out. It's too much. Um, but I wish I had gone in more with that attitude because at first, the first few years, I went in trying to just, knock it out of the park and get out there as soon as I could. And then I ended up taking extra years just because I was happy and comfortable. So I wish I had known that. I wish I had known um, I wish I had known that uh, what's often adaptive in undergrad and to get you into those programs is not always adaptive once you're in those programs. And what I mean by that is, I mean, if you're getting into one of these programs, you're probably going to have pretty high grades, a good GRE score. You have like research experience or clinical experience. You have a lot of experience. You're used to doing a lot and doing it kind of perfectly. But in graduate school, I mean, no one really cares if you get an A versus an A minus, right? And so you kind of have to give up perfectionism. It forces you to in a lot of ways. And just accepting that prior to feeling forced into it is going to make your graduate experience a lot better. And not bad practicing even prior to graduate school. Um, yeah, so I wish I had known that. Um, because it was a hard time coming, figuring that out for myself, and being able to loosen up maybe some of my own standards around my work. I also, no, I'll stop there. Those are the main things that I wish I had known.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what is the biggest piece of advice that you would give to someone considering going into a graduate program, just
Ooh.
like overall?
Yeah, I would say talk to somebody who has been in a similar path and see what they recommend. Because, for example, I see a lot of people applying for, thinking that they have to apply for a clinical psychology PhD program to do clinical work. And you can do clinical work with a master's program and be very well prepared to do that. And so it's really about